All right. I think it's time. We've got a bunch of people eating lunch. They may wander in, they may not. But we'll get started. So a ton of my content is pretty similar to Dawn's, so I think we're going to hit you again on a topic that obviously is important. So maybe I'll cover it in a slightly different way or have some other data. And the interesting thing is, as I put, I had, as we all do, CFP time. It's like, man, I got an amazing idea. This is going to be great. You submit it, and then you start to write the talk, and it's like, maybe I don't have as many great ideas as I thought I had. Because, the idea around this talk is Containerd, the project I'm a maintainer on. We've got some other Containerd folks here coming up on basically 10 years old. And the idea is we're doing pretty well. We feel like a healthy project, but as I actually kind of walk through things we've done, it's like maybe we just got lucky. And, we've done some good things, and I'll talk through that. But so kind of what I'm thinking is I'll go through this material as long as I don't get too wordy and rambly. I may finish it earlier, and then it maybe be cooler than me just saying a bunch of stuff that the last 10, 15 minutes, we bounce some ideas, things that you're doing in your project that maybe Containerd's never thought about, or, things we should all try. So let's see how that works. Super quick intro about me if you don't know who I am. I've only been really actively in open source the last 12 years. If you add those numbers, you can see I've been working a long time in software, but really kind of it's these three different phases where I got kind of interested in open source in that middle period when I was doing distro work, but not really contributing or being part of projects. And then the last 12 years, I got involved in Docker and the OCI, and then helped bring Containerd out of the Docker project. And then, kind of fun, I've also helped launch some projects. So Finch, that came out of our team at AWS, and then in super small text that maybe you can't read. I've even created some of my own projects that other people ended up using, and so I'm kind of a maintainer of some small projects that folks like to use. So that's kind of my background, my involvement in open source. So, I think we all understand the general problem. I'm couching it sort of in CNCF terms because that's where we are. But, there's a laundry list of projects that are all 10 plus years old. And I tried to get some data. In the last 5 years, there's been 21 more incubating projects. There's been 23 more projects that have graduated, and they didn't go from 0 years old to graduated. So, you look at this, all these projects are at least 5+ years old. Many of them are much older since the inception. And, as Dawn said earlier, and as many people have talked about over the years, your life changes. You change jobs. The employer you had that was sort of asking you to work on open source, now you don't do that anymore. And I found a bit of data. Sorry, it's US based because that's what was easy to find. But even employee tenure is dropping for young people. It's super low, but for people with more experience, even they're staying. Having a shorter duration in a job over the years. And take that for what you will, it's just some averages. But it does mean that, we tend, as we look at projects that are 10 to 15 years old, many of those people are not, staying in the same job or having the same role or working on the same thing for much more than a few years. So that's kind of the framing of the problem. And, it's not that project growth is slowing either. We've got tons, the CNCF is up to a couple hundred projects. And some percentage of those may get archived. They may not, last for 5 to 10 years, but some of them will. And over time, we know that, the founder of that project or some of the core maintainers, will move on. They'll go do something different. They'll retire. They'll move to Europe and live on a lake somewhere. Who knows? And so, for sustainability, these projects are going to have some kind of pipeline of new contributors. And I thought this was also interesting data that I collected just by, I meant to put the link here so I'm not just making this up, and I forgot. So if you want to know, there's a website, the Open Source Contributor Index, I think is what it's called. But, the top 5 enterprise employers, I counted up the data from this index, and there's been a huge drop-off in the number of people employed by enterprises actually contributing to open source, and it doesn't seem correlated with COVID or anything like that. It seems like there's an actual decrease in the number of people who are actually even available to work on open source. And so that's another interesting twist in this whole problem that maybe is a whole nother discussion. So let's talk about Containerd for a few minutes. It started with a single maintainer from Docker in 2015. Over that next year, 2016, a lot of us got involved, and the discussions about donation were happening. But the actual donation to the CNCF happened at KubeCon Berlin in March 2017. Later that year, we added the concept of a reviewer. And then a few years after that, we introduced a security advisor role, which again is not really about code contribution. It's about handling, a group of people that are willing to handle CVE reports and, that life cycle of dealing with security issues. And we now have 11 security advisors. And then just a couple years ago, we introduced maintainer emeritus role. Again, we're not unique in that. A lot of projects have that in their governance. And so, again, I compiled some data that may be of interest that just shows over time our maintainer count, which is pretty stable, around 11, I think, the last couple of years. And you can kind of see on that timeline where we introduced this emeritus role, did some cleanup, found there were a bunch of reviewers who kind of no longer actively worked on the project. And so, at this point, we kind of have this stable set of both committers and reviewers, which we call that entire group maintainers. So we don't say if you're a reviewer, you're not really a maintainer. We're all maintainers. Some have commit access to the repository. So that's kind of the makeup of the project at this point. So, the things I do feel we've done well is, again, not a unique thing. There are other projects that have done this as well. But adding these new roles really did allow us to have more avenues for community participation. And it did increase, sort of the group of people involved in the project that felt like they had a stake or a way to participate. And also with those additional roles, gave us, I was trying to find the right word, I put coalesce. But it's kind of hard to go from 0 to committer without time to kind of understand this person's approach to review, to how they sort of see the project future, its vision. And so, giving someone reviewer gives us time to kind of see how they fit within the community framework. And it doesn't require that all-in decision of, making someone a committer without some time to kind of coalesce them, I guess, into the community. And then adding emeritus really provided a relief valve for us. One easy thing is just if people who used to be maintainers aren't there and your governance has rules about 2/3 voting, then it becomes an actual problem with impact to your ability to do efficient and successful votes on changes to your governance. And then, the other thing I think that was helpful to have emeritus in our governance, if someone comes and looks at your project and there's 18 maintainers, they probably think, well, there's not really room for me to grow into that role because there's already so many. So, bringing that number down, I feel like gives people a feeling, okay, there's room for me in this project. There's room to grow from reviewer or security advisor to a committer role at some point. So the things that, again, I'm speaking from my personal viewpoint, that, we still need to grow in, that, are areas that we haven't done as well, is bug management that helps sort of project newbies. And so, a lot of projects have beginner label on issues, or they triage into, good first issues. We've done it in spurts, but it takes somebody with time to actually go through all your issues to really decide, like, this is a good issue. This, will be something that a beginner could step in and try and work on. Somewhat related, and I know this is a broad open source problem for everyone, but documentation, both the generation of it, the maintenance of it, the upkeep of it, even the infrastructure of it. We've just had this discussion recently with a doc that Sam added. Do we want this on the website? Do we want it in the repo? And, some projects have figured out the way to manage that with, generating Markdown from your Markdown HTML from your repo. We're still kind of figuring out what tool makes the most sense for that. But, those are things that we all know. If you open up GitHub and go to a project, you'd like there to be a well-organized set of documentation that helps you onboard, helps you understand the project, API docs. And so that's something that just honestly, I think we've struggled to find our groove in that aspect of the project. And then just time. Containerd isn't as big a project as Kubernetes. I'm sure there's other even larger projects out there. But Containerd has grown significantly since, our pre-1.0 days. And it was interesting, we had a mini summit at the January, I think it was in January. And, luckily we were able to get people in person. It was a great day of kind of hashing through some things about the project. And I don't remember who did it, but we kind of did just this informal poll some late in the day. I think there were at least 20 people there, all people who've been active in the project for 8 years, for 1 year. And it was like, is anyone here working full-time on Containerd? And I'm pretty sure there was zero hands went up for my employer or my time is 100% on Containerd. I think there are a few people that, could say they're 30 to 50%, but most of us are, juggling Containerd with a bunch of other commitments we have in our roles. And so I think, just like any open source project, this means it impacts your responsiveness in your Slack channel to new issues, to the general flow of pull request review. And so, this is an area that we're trying to figure out in this new era where we don't have a bunch of people who are fully committed or have been able to make themselves available to the project sort of all day as a day job. And so, these are, again, areas we bounce around as maintainers to try and improve on. And, there may be things we can learn from other projects as well. So a couple recommendations. This is where it gets hard because there's 100 different ways you could go. But, I think one thing that has definitely benefited our project is try to foster some aspect of real community with the people in your project. I always used to tell people that wanted to get involved, at my previous employer at Amazon. They're like, hey, what's the GitHub issue that I can go get involved in Containerd? Or, can I just start creating PRs? And yes, you can. But I've always felt like having some kind of personal connection to the project. Join the Slack channel, see who people are, like find out kind of what's happening in the project, what's the pulse of the project. And so, if you are a project and you're trying to attract and sort of develop a real community, I think having places that feel tangible for a person to have personal connection. So, obviously we're usually very, very physically dispersed. So, Slack may be the best you can do for most communication, but also having some kind of community call, something you can join, something that if people feel comfortable, they can turn on video, you can chat, you can see how people are doing, but also, make sure it's very clear how the call works. We have an agenda, we take notes, maybe it's recorded. These are touch points for people to see there's, real people involved in the project. It's not just, GitHub technical interactions. And then, obviously, if your community can attend events, meet together in an event, have a dinner, have some kind of, again, touch point of seeing that projects are more than just PRs and issues. And then, as I mentioned, there's a lot of, geographic disbursement in many of our projects. So as much as you can, organize your project for async efficiency. And Dawn mentioned this, use the features that are available in GitHub, roadmaps, project boards, milestones, releases, so that people know, like, here's how I get involved in the actual decision-making and planning of the project. Here's how I can see what the next point release is about. What are we trying to accomplish? And then definitely trade or rotate roles so that people can understand the different aspects of the project. I will say, I think we're still working on this in Containerd. It's easy when someone does a role and they do it really well, just kind of let them keep doing it. They always churn out the releases or the release notes. But this is a great way to kind of make sure that your project has sustainability, is to make sure that other people know how these processes work and can execute them themselves. So, the first one on kind of building a pipeline is, a huge topic. There's a lot of aspects about what's the ease with which someone could come to your project and get involved. And so my general point is, make it as least painful as possible. And what I mean by that is, how easy is it to go through your initial README or your developing.md or contributing.md, your chance of getting, if there is a shrinking pool of available contributors and they're already pressed for time, then your ability to make it easy for them to come to your project, see what's possible, see how to make a PR, see how to build it, how do I run tests, that's going to increase your chances of them, getting involved in your project. So I think that's, again, there's 100 different things we could talk about, but whatever you can do to think about how would it be least painful to come and participate in my project. And then, having a clear path to influencing, obviously this is really about the contributor ladder. Dawn talked about this earlier today. And it's not just, I guess it's easy for me, mostly being a software developer my whole career, that I do naturally think about code contribution. But when we think about these roles that people can play and have in our project, it'd be great to think about areas that are not just about code contribution, like the security advisor role we have in Containerd, but obviously there are other roles, like someone who may love making documentation clear and rewriting kind of the organization and the flow of your docs. And those people need to have a clear path to influence in your community or project or repo as well. So I cheated and threw this slide on like a couple hours ago because Don pointed me to a website I didn't know existed. So I should have, but I didn't. And this is a super awesome resource that even says I was a part of helping create it. So that's cool. But yeah, there's a lot of great ideas here, a lot of very practical ways to actually think about, okay, my project would like a better way to grow contributors. Awesome resource by the CNCF, and a great jumping off point to other resources about how to use the tools and capabilities to bring people to your project. All right, so I did it. I only talked for 21 minutes, I think. And yeah, I think we go till 1:45, is that right? So like Don, I either stand up here awkwardly for a while, or we can discuss. First of all, if there's any specific questions I can answer about Containerd or recommendations I've made, let's start there, and then, you know, if maybe I don't have the answer, maybe someone in this room has answers to your question as well. So who wants to start? Thank you. Thanks.
Is this working? Yeah, it is. Oh, okay. Thank you for your talk, and I took a lot of notes. I'm Nikki. I'm in the TAG Environmental Sustainability in the Green Reviews Working Group as a chair. And something that happens quite often is that we'll have someone really excited to work on something, and we've done everything. We have a clear contribution. Well, it can always be clear, but the contribution path for newcomers is as clear as it can be. Maybe they comment on an issue that's been tagged as beginner friendly, and then they disappear. And so I was wondering, this is something I struggle with a lot. Do you like double check with this person after some weeks, or do you kind of have a time box that if they don't respond for X amount of time, you re-triage or reassign it? What do you do?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. It reminds me of like, I can't remember how many years ago this was, but maybe Mike or some of our other maintainers remember, all of a sudden there were like a bunch of people we'd never heard of commenting on issues. Can you assign me this issue? I want to work on it. And it turned out that a professor at University of Texas, I think it was extra credit, something in his class, it was like, go find an open source project either in virtualization or containerization, and if you submit a PR, you get extra credit or something like that. So like we got this like stream of people like, can you assign me this issue? They had never talked to us. And you know, it was cool. It was like, yeah, if you want to learn about open source, that's great. But many of them never did anything. And I know that's a very unique situation, but I think, you know, when we've had that in general, I think just a comment a few weeks later, like, you know, ping their GitHub ID, hey, you showed interest, like, you know, is there anything we can do to help? You know, that's usually been our kind of first response is like a couple weeks go by, maybe, you know, sometimes people have created a PR, it didn't pass CI or they didn't sign their commit, you know, and people do, you know, whatever happens, they disappear. So usually we just try and you know, maybe give them 1 or 2, you know, couple weeks, a month, you know, there could be vacation, but maybe they got sick. So we do try and give a few opportunities, and then, Yeah, I don't know what you would call it, since we don't usually do GitHub like assign issues. Like it's fine, like someone else may just pick it up. Like we don't really say this is yours. But yeah, I mean, I think the most we can do is just try and reach out a couple times and then, yeah, just let somebody else know that it's free to work on. Anybody else have thoughts on that? Yeah, Jesse.
One little thing. Do you think there's value in putting that junior contributor? Like I see, like if you're explicit about whatever your maintainers decide, that can really help you as a maintainer then decide an issue or put something back in the queue.
Yeah, so Jesse's comment is maybe that's a good thing to be explicit about in whatever your doc is that talks about contribution. They're like, here's how we handle, like, I want to work on this. That's a good point. I don't think we have anything very specific about that, but maybe that helps. It's like, the problem is I don't know how you like, there's a timer and when it goes off, you know, it's yeah.
I think as long as you all agree as maintainers, that's what it is.
Yeah, right, yeah.
That's the most important part that works for us.
Yeah. So I don't know if that helped. I know it's.
Yeah, no, thank you. I just wanted to ask take this
Yeah.
opportunity to ask everyone. Thank you.
Yeah, Mike Brown.
Yeah, hi, Phil. I find that the way you get a new reviewer and a new maintainer is to mentor them. I like to pick one or two, maybe three at most, right? New engagement people that I can try to mentor over a year.
Yeah.
And I find that's the best way to get response because you're talking to them, hey, how's it going? Become friends. I think that's a necessary element because then that gets them in the community. They're talking, and they usually express to me that they have a deep interest. They'd like to do something more than just a couple of contributions. And then once they've shown that, a guy like Samuel Park, the next thing we know, he's a great reviewer and maintainer in the project.
Yeah, so I assume most people heard that, but Mike is mentioning a direct kind of mentorship. And so I think that's been more possible when someone's dropped in our Slack channel. And sometimes I get a DM or even an email, like a student saying, I read about Containerd, I'm interested in the project. I mean, that touch point gives you the opportunity to say, like, if you pick something to work on or you have a specific interest, there can be actual like a direct mentoring relationship. And Mike was just saying, like, do that for a year, like just kind of pair with that person. If they're interested and they're willing to do that, then obviously, I think Dawn shared that the LF now has, I'm looking at Dan, some kind of formal mentoring. I mean, there's LFX mentor. Is that the same thing? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so CNCF is involved in a concrete mentoring program, so that may be of interest to some projects as well. Yes.
Hey, I'm Stefan, I'm a Flux maintainer, and I'm very interested in what you said around have this security team, which are not actual maintainers, and we took the exact opposite of that. In the security team in Flux are the maintainers that actually know everything, and they also have to be security conscious. We have people that actually worked in security. Their day job is security, and that's why I'm in security. I'm not in the security team. I don't think I'm that obsessed with security. And you said the opposite. And can you say more about it? How you attract people and putting them on security issues?
Yeah. So I probably glossed over that a little more than I should have. So the people on our security advisor role in the project tend to be either, I mean, most of us work for an enterprise cloud provider, someone who cares deeply about Containerd being a secure piece of their platform. And so out of that, we know people who are maybe never going to contribute to Containerd, but they're already on the security team for GKE or IBM or Amazon.
So they are security experts, just not specialized in Containerd source code, but they know how to triage a CV, how to discuss it. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we assume these are people who are either in the security space already, but it gives them a voice in Containerd that they probably wouldn't have because they're not contributors. So Sam's leaning forward, so I think he can maybe even.
Yeah, these are what Phil was saying. These are generally people that are at enterprise companies, at cloud providers that care about security, and they help us with the triage process. So with understanding the security report that come in, how does that play not just in the context of Containerd directly, but in the context of a platform that we're developing? A lot of them are familiar with CVE process in terms of getting CVEs, responding to them, they can help us coordinate those and things like that.
Nice.
So these are a set of people that we have relationships with that we trust. They are not generally going to be the right patches for it, but they help us manage the rest of the security process.
So you would recommend we could change the governance and remove this very hard requirement, though, if you are in the Flux security team, you need to be a core maintainer, you need to understand everything. We could actually remove this constraint and invite security experts, if that specialize in Flux, to help us with the triage, with all the, all the things that you have to do around the CV, right?
I don't know that I would say I have a specific recommendation for you, but I think this process has worked really well for me.
Cool.
Yeah, and you can, I think we've tried to explain it, but in our governance.md, we define this role very concretely, and maybe go read that and see if it makes sense. But yeah, as Sam said, I mean, like practically, like if someone comes to, now that we use GitHub security advisories, if someone opens it, obviously.
Yeah, we switched to that as well, yeah.
Yeah, like the maintainers are automatically can see that.
Yeah.
We just simply add at Containerd/security advisors, and this group of people now has visibility and can participate in the conversation, help triage, et cetera.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Yep. Yes. Sure.
Organizations that might want to assign something. The problem with security, to some extent, it's sort of a prestige problem. Sure, Kubernetes.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I don't know if I have any specific examples, but I do agree, and when I've had discussions about open source contribution and employers in general, I sometimes feel bad because I do agree Containerd and Kubernetes is probably another good example. Like, it's critical enough to most consumers that drawing that line between you want your employees to participate here because you probably want either a voice in that community, you want to know when there's security issues, you want that connection point because it's connected to revenue or your reputation if there's a major issue with that component. For other projects, that could be a harder sell, so to speak. And so, yeah, which means I don't have a great answer. Yeah, exactly. It's a problem that, as I said, I usually feel bad in that kind of discussion because I'm like, I've always experienced like kind of an easy discussion about that because of the easily drawn dotted line to like the business, the bottom line, whatever. But it obviously gets harder depending on the project. Anybody else have ideas, thoughts there? Want to share? Yeah, so, yeah, I mean, I know it depends on the employer. Like, I know some OSPOs have kind of levels of kind of like, is this part of your day job? Do we allow it, you know, on your own time? And those, you know, I know that some people, I've known both at IBM and Amazon, who have a passion for something that has nothing to do with the business, and therefore, you know, they do an on your own time kind of model, which obviously is painful in the sense of then it becomes your ability to stretch yourself, not the best, you know, model for open source contribution. But, you know, I think that's what I've usually seen. If you can't draw that line to the business, there has to be some other way to get approval or ability to participate. What time are we at? Oh, I think we are out of time. But I'll be around. A lot of these folks who know just as much or as more than I do are around, so happy to keep the discussion going. But thanks for coming.